Good evening and welcome. It's gratifying to see everyone inside on this beautiful spring evening, to see that so many people are interested in becoming better informed voters. My name is Diana Dakey. I'm the current president of the League of Women Voters of Lackawanna County. And tonight's debate is sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Lackawanna County and the University of Scranton Political Science Department. And we want to thank the university for supporting us as we are able to present tonight's debate. The League of Women Voters is nonpartisan, which means that we do not support or oppose any political party or candidate. The mission of the League is to promote political responsibility through the informed and active participation by citizens in their government. And we encourage you to join the League. Please see me at the end of the debate if you would like a membership form. Alternatively, you may go to our website at www.LWVLackawanna.org. Please support our work also by making a donation on your way out. Donations help us cover costs, including taping, such as tonight, so that the debates can be viewed by a wider audience. And Cindy or Patty or Dan or one of our members will be at the back of the room at the close of the debate, and we hope you'll make a small donation. We want to thank ECTV for taping tonight's debate. This is not a live broadcast. The taped debate will be aired on Comcast 19 local TV, so please check the ECTV schedule, which can be found on our website. The taped debate will also be available on YouTube via links from our website. Now, if you were unable to attend Tuesday's discussion about the Lackawanna County Change in Government ballot question, you will be able to view the event via the link on our website also. Once again, our website is LWVLackawanna.org. The most important upcoming event, of course, is Election Day on Tuesday, May 20th, so don't forget to vote. Then join us for election returns via live broadcast from ECTV, where Andrea Mulreen, our past president, and Dave Wenzel, you said, will be hosting an informal discussion as the election returns come in. A few procedural items, please. We ask you to turn off or silence your phones or other devices. And please be aware of our policy that no person or candidate or political group is allowed to use or edit any media from a League of Women Voters event for campaign purposes. So any use of media requires the express written approval of the League of Women Voters. So therefore, you may not take any sound bites or excerpts from tonight's debate and use this for your own purposes without permission. Well, tonight's debate is between the candidates for the Pennsylvania 113th Legislative District. I'd like to introduce our moderator, Andrea Mulreen. She will be the moderator for tonight's debate. And Andrea is presently employed by the Commonwealth Medical College as Director of Corporate and Foundation Relations. She is the past president of the League of Women Voters of Lackawanna County, a position in which she served for over 7 years, and she's a very tough act to follow. She currently remains on our board and is a very supportive and valuable member of our organization. I'll turn it over to Andrea.
Thank you, Diana, very much. And Diana is a great president of the League. Welcome to our candidates this evening. Thank you for being here. This is the debate between the candidates for the 113th Legislative District. As I'm sure you all are aware, we've had a redistricting, so the lines for our districts have changed. The 113th district now includes West Scranton, North Scranton, Green Ridge, Minooka, and Center City, and part of South Scranton, plus South Abington Township and Clark's Green. So a lot of the lines for the districts that we had known have all changed, and that does change what these gentlemen are used to doing in terms of campaigning. You're going places where you've never been before. Pine Brook too. Okay, let me add that to this. Thank you. So a couple of things about tonight's event. The debate should last about 60 minutes. All candidates will answer the same set of questions, and no questions were given in advance. All questions will have a 90-second response limit, and each candidate will be allowed up to 2 rebuttals of 1 minute each. They can use the full 2-minute allotment at one time if they so desire. Candidates will be allowed a 2-minute closing statement, but there are no opening statements. I will do a little bit of an intro on each one of these. And I would also like to state that Marty and Lee are the Democratic candidates for the 113th Legislative District. There is also a Republican candidate, Marcel Lisi. Marcel was not invited to participate in the debate this evening because he is running unopposed on the Republican ticket, so there's no race. So what we're looking at here is a race between these two gentlemen in the 113th. So with that, let us start by introducing Marty Flynn. Marty is a resident of Scranton. He went to high school at Scranton Prep and earned a bachelor's degree at Marywood in legal studies. He is currently a member of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives representing the 113th District, and he's a member of the Aging and Adult Services Committee, the Commerce Committee, and a member and secretary of the State Government Committee. He is a community volunteer, and he has worked also as a former Lackawanna County Prison Inmate Education Program Coordinator and Chairman of the Prison Misconduct Board. And he was also a Lackawanna County Prison Guard. So Marty, thank you for being with us this evening. Lee Morgan is another candidate for this, Democratic candidate for this particular seat. He is a graduate of Scranton Central High School. He is a candidate now for the Pennsylvania House of Representatives, and he is an official of the Scranton-Lackawanna Taxpayers Association, something that he served on for quite a few years, I might add. He is a truck driver and in the past had worked at Rustacraft, and he has 2 daughters, Fawn and Brittany, and 2 sons, Lee and Shane Aaron. So thank you, Lee, for joining us here this evening. The first question, we drew straws, will go to Lee. And the first question simply is, Lee, what do you bring to the table that your opponent does not? Why are you the best candidate for this particular office? And if you would, please pull that microphone right up to being in front of you so that we can pick up what you're saying.
Well, the reason I believe I'm the best candidate is because of the financial situation the city finds itself in. I've participated at council meetings for about 25 years, basically. I am well versed in the problems that face the city. You know, I decided when I got into this race that the representatives in Harrisburg weren't representing the city the way they should. As a matter of fact, council had a meeting where they invited the state representatives in. And at that time, when Mr. Flynn didn't appear, I knew that we needed to make a change in the House of Representatives, because when you have a city in the financial straits this city finds itself in, and somebody who's elected and represents your city sends an aide in, I think it's a very troubling thing. And finding where the city finds itself, I've come up with a recovery plan. I presented it as a candidate for mayor. It's a very functional plan and will absolutely work, as other people have reviewed it. And I just think that when we send people to represent us, they should know the issues, they should know the people who live in their district, and they should be willing to answer their questions and serve them. And I think that's the one thing that's lacking in the 113th. Thank you.
Thank you. Marty, the question goes to you.
First off, I'd like to thank you, Andrea, for having us, and Diane, and the rest of the League of Women's Voters. It's very important that, you know, we're very transparent in the office and that we discuss the issues in front of the public. So I just wanted to thank you for having me. And I'd like to start off by saying I think I'm the best candidate because I've been doing the job for 17 months. I've worked incessantly every day at helping the issues of not only Scranton, but of the rest of the 113th district that is actually part of South Abington and Clark's Green. It's not just the city of Scranton, and all the issues that we're faced. I've introduced legislation, I've volunteered my time, I've raised money for certain events, I've had bike giveaways, coat drives, anything to help the people of my district I've done, and I will continue to work tirelessly to help everyone and help our area become a better place.
Okay, thank you. So let's talk a little bit. I know the district doesn't completely cover Scranton. Well, it's not all of Scranton, and it does cover other parts of the Commonwealth as well. But let's talk specifically about Act 47. So I'm going to start with a little bit of an intro. A Times Tribune editorial on April 13th states that a lack of political will in City Hall contributes mightily to the government's failure to recover, but it's only part of the problem. And again, this is the words from the Times Tribune editorial. The state government could do plenty if lawmakers are able to summon political courage of their own. One of our biggest problems is that we need property tax reform. So will you, as a legislator, introduce a bill for property tax reform? And if yes, what would that bill contain? And Marty, you answer that question first.
Andrea, I actually voted yesterday on a bill, House Bill 1773. It's Chairman of the Commerce Committee, Chairman Chris Ross's bill. And I actually tried to amend the bill, but my amendments were found out of order, to include Scranton in, after we leave Act 47 status. The bill essentially pushes Scranton and other municipalities out of Act 47 under, I believe it is 6 years. Okay, it's a path out of Act 47, but the bill actually does not offer any new revenue sources. Okay, so what happens once we get out of Act 47, the bill does not allow us to collect a local service tax once we're out of Act 47. And I tried to amend that bill, and my amendments were found out of order. But I'm going to continue to work, because the bill passed the House, and I'm going to continue to work with the Senate on the bill to get Scranton the ability to collect the local service tax after we get out of Act 47 status, because we actually do not receive any new revenue streams after we get out of Act 47 through this bill. So that was my problem with it.
Okay, thank you. Lee, the question goes to you. Would you introduce a bill for property tax reform? And if yes, what would it contain?
Okay. Yes, I would introduce a bill to eliminate property tax in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Totally. School, county, city, all of them. Because I think that we've built an antiquated tax structure that goes back a couple hundred years in the Commonwealth when these were farming communities. I think the problem we have at this time is they brought up a flawed Bill 76 on both sides of the House and the Senate. Neither of those bills were workable. I think that we have to think about how we're going to proceed, and the way I would do that is that I would take the proceeds from legalized gambling in Pennsylvania, I would create a state lottery earmarked only for elimination of property tax. I'd also tap into small games of chance in taverns, and I might consider a sales tax increase if it was necessary. But I think that what we've done is we've overtaxed all the property owners, and what it's given them is no opportunity to invest in their properties, which has caused blight and decline in all the cities. But we elect people that have no knowledge of government, and they go there, have no knowledge of the problems, and that way they can't find solutions, and that's the problem we face.
Okay, thank you. I want to talk now about Marcellus Shale and the severance tax. And I'm going to ask you 4 questions first that I want just a one-word answer to, and then I'll give you time after that to actually respond in depth to the question. So the first question, the statement, there are proposals in both the House and the Senate for implementing a severance tax on gas drilling. So the questions that I have, the first question, and Lee, you'll answer these questions first, and then Marty, you'll answer yes or no or whatever the response is, and then we'll go back to Lee to finish up. So Lee, would you vote yes or no to implement a severance tax?
Yes.
And Marty?
Yes.
And Lee, what tax rate is appropriate?
I'd go between 7 and 15%.
And Marty, what tax rate is appropriate?
5.
And should the revenue from the tax be used only in the counties where the wells exist or statewide? So your response should be counties or statewide. Lee?
Statewide.
And Marty?
Statewide.
And the last question, should the revenue from the tax be used for general purposes or have specific designations such as education and the environment? So your answer should be either general or specific. And Lee, that goes to you.
Specific.
And Marty?
Specific.
So now, gentlemen, you have 90 seconds each to respond to that. Explain your answers to the questions, and if you were to write the bill to impose the tax, what would it contain? And Lee, the question goes to you first.
If I was going to write a bill to implement a severance tax, the first thing I'd do is I'd write a bill where all gas produced in Pennsylvania, 20% of it would be kept local and sold at a substantially lower price to residents inside the Commonwealth, since the gas is owned by people in the Commonwealth. The other thing I do is I'd put a 7 to 15% tax on it, because we have a lot of problems. And the one problem that I would go after is Pennsylvania's long-term debt and pension problem. And I just think that we have to also, out of that money, take 10% of that and use 90% for that, and 10% I think we should put in a special fund and just leave it sit there to accumulate. That's about all I have.
Okay, thank you. Marty, the question to you. Explain your answers and be specific, and if you were to write the bill to impose the tax, what would it contain?
Currently, I would use the bill to fund education. Governor Corbett has cut about $900 million out of our education, minus some federal stimulus funds, but we're still talking hundreds of millions of dollars that have been cut. And we've sown the problem where our children 10, 15 years from now aren't going to have a proper education, and these effects are going to hurt us year in and year out, and it's going to get worse and worse. We need to reestablish the cuts and properly fund education. We spend about $14,000 a year educating a student, and we spend $41,100 a year on a prison inmate. So that lets you see the current administration's set of priorities. And I think it's very important that every dollar that's invested in education yields $15 in the private economy. So I very much think we should use Marcellus Shale funds to the 5% on top of, I think we should keep an impact fee also. So 5% on top of the impact fee should go to educating our children. That's something we owe them, a good education.
Great, thank you very much. So Marty, the next question goes to you first, and let's continue on the other side of Marcellus Shale. So the one part is the severance tax, the other part is the environment. Given the opportunities and dangers inherent in natural gas drilling from Marcellus Shale, what legislation needs to be passed to provide maximum protection to the environment and public health while capitalizing on the economic potential of this natural resource? So again, the question to you first, Marty.
Most importantly, we have such an asset in Marcellus Shale. We need to properly, responsibly harness that. Okay, there's over 20,000 wells that have been drilled in the state of Pennsylvania, and I believe there's only over 80 inspectors. So that's a tremendous strain on the people. I know the DEP has been cut seriously, up to around 60% since Governor Tom Ridge. It hasn't been reestablished, and it leaves about 30 minutes of inspection time per well, per inspector. And I don't think that's a responsible way to deal with keeping up with the environmental hazards of the drill sites. You know, it's a relatively new Marcellus Shale drilling. The fracking is a relatively young process. We need to invest in the environmental aspect of it as well. We can't just take the energy and not care about the environment.
Okay, thank you. Lee, the question to you.
Could you repeat it, please?
So, given the opportunities and dangers inherent in natural gas drilling from Marcellus Shale, what legislation needs to be passed to provide maximum protection to the environment and public health while capitalizing on the economic potential of this natural resource?
Well, I think there should be inspections and oversight on the sites, but I've been on most of these sites. I've been on Shell, Anadarko, WPX, Chesapeake, Chief. I've been on almost all these sites all over Pennsylvania where they're fracking. And I just like to say that these companies pay a lot of attention to what they're doing, and there is no room there for carelessness. I mean, I've seen the process from the very beginning, when they drill, right to when they frack, right when they put, I mean, I've seen all of it. And I just want to say that they're going to protect their own interests because they want to harvest this gas to make money. The only question we have to ask is, can the residents of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, since all the residents of this Commonwealth own this gas, can we get a share of this gas and share it with our community? Because I don't see them doing anything to jeopardize their opportunity to make money, and I've seen the way they function on the sites, and I've seen the way they're policed. And I'm going to tell you right now, there's no games going on there. There's a lot of security on those sites. They pay a lot of attention. And I just like to have the state come in and do a little oversight to make sure everything's on the up and up. But you can't even spill a drop of water on those sites or they throw your company off the site. There's no games going on there.
Okay, thank you. The next question, let's move on and talk about jobs. And Lee, you will answer this question first. According to a report released in February, the 8.7% unemployment rate in the Scranton-Wilkes-Barre-Hazleton metropolitan area continues to be the highest of any metropolitan area in the state and above both the national and state rates. What immediate actions can and will you, as a state legislator, take that will impact unemployment in our region?
If elected a state representative in Harrisburg, the first thing I will do is enact legislation that will make Scranton the only Class 2A city, a light manufacturing enterprise zone, to help the city recover in its financial straits it's in right now. The other thing I do is I would ask City Council and the Mayor to implement the Scranton-Abington Planning Association's comprehensive plan that will move jobs from the Abingtons, basically, and other places, into Dunmore and Scranton's vacant industrial parks. I would also bring money from Harrisburg to make that more feasible and happen much more quickly. I think we need to really consider exactly where we stand here. We need to reach out to the Chamber of Commerce. We need to reach out to outlying communities and make Scranton, the only Class 2A city, a industrial employment hub with light manufacturing. And I think that since Scranton's the only Class 2A city, we can use this in a test of new plans and programs from Harrisburg and turn Scranton around once and for all. Instead of calling on commuter taxes from people in the Abingtons and the outlying areas, I think there'd be a lot of support from the community around the city of Scranton. And that should have happened already, to be quite honest with you. That money should have came to from Harrisburg about 5 or 10 years ago.
Okay, thank you. Marty, the question goes to you.
Andrea, to me, the most important thing for Pennsylvania to do right now to spark jobs is to expand Medicaid. It's the most important thing. You're looking at an influx of about $44 billion over the next 5 years. Okay, that's about 20,000 jobs right off the bat in our healthcare industry. And it would actually give over 500,000 Pennsylvanians healthcare coverage, working Pennsylvanians, not people that don't have jobs, or working Pennsylvanians, 500,000 jobs. And it's money we're already paying in federal tax that we're not taking advantage of. I think that is very, very important. Also, I will advocate the next governor to stop giving tax breaks to large companies and start investing in our smaller companies and things that are going to stimulate job growth, and especially in our area. I think it's very, very important, and I think our area is conducive to so many big cities on the eastern seaboard that we're a great launching pad with our transportation. We're a transportation hub. I think it's a great area for manufacturing and a great area for distribution of products. So.
Okay, thank you. Marty, you answer the next question first. And let's move on to education. I know we've talked a little bit about this already, but I want to give you an opportunity if you have additional comments that you want to make. School district budgets, as you well know, have been under stress. Needed reforms have been acknowledged to require pension reform, property tax reform, state funding formulas, and school district consolidation. What are your priorities for addressing school district funding in the Commonwealth?
Is this me first?
Yes.
Okay. My priorities with school district funding are, the governor has cut education funding so harsh into the bone that it's actually weighing down the school districts and the tax base, and it's making them raise their rates year in and year out. And the problem that's occurring is, in Scranton alone, almost a third, actually it's over a third of the property is owned by nonprofits that don't pay any taxes. So it forces a huge burden on the elderly population of our area who don't have children in school that are paying these raising rates. So I think it's very important that we move forward and seek some kind of property tax relief, you know, but not leave education funding behind. That's the most important thing. We can't keep sustaining these rates flying up every year in, year out. We must seek new revenue sources, and Marcellus Shale's another closing the Delaware loophole. These are things that we have to do to bring new monies in so that the tax structure is supported.
Okay, thank you. Lee, the question goes to you.
Could you repeat
Sure.
that, please?
School district budgets have been under stress. Needed reforms have been acknowledged to require pension reform, property tax reform, state funding formulas, and school district consolidation. What are your priorities for addressing school district funding?
Well, to be quite blunt, I think the problems we're experiencing in education have been created by Pennsylvania's legislature, both the Senate and the House. I think we're trying to educate children to pass tests. I think we need to roll ourselves back and let teachers teach and remove prepackaged curriculum from schools. I think that when we send teachers to school to learn how to teach, we should allow them to teach. I think we've allowed politics to permeate into every aspect of education. This isn't only an issue for seniors who can't afford it. We've got a lot of children in the district who can't afford school lunch. That's been an issue lately. All the legislature has done to Pennsylvania is create poverty, unemployment, and one failed plan after another. I think we need to get back to the fundamentals and allow teachers to teach math, English, and writing. I think we need to allow the students to develop to become self-educators and learners. And I think that when they get to high school, they need to be prepared to go to college without remedial education. And I blame that on the legislatures. And as far as the pension problems we have for teachers, the legislature created that too. And we need to change the legislature. The problem is that isn't that we have over 200 legislators. They're not doing their job. That's the problem we have.
Okay, thank you. Marty, you wanted to use a rebuttal.
Yes, I would like to say, Andrea, that these are federal mandates and have nothing to do with the state legislature.
Okay. All right, Lee, you'll answer this question first. And let's talk a little bit, you talked about college, so let's talk a little bit about higher education. College students today face large amounts of debt and an entry into a very weak job market. How serious do you think this problem is, and what solutions do you propose for lifting the burden that graduating students face?
Well, I do agree, and I've spoke about that before. I think that college students carry so much debt coming out of school that it's obscene. I think there needs to be increased funding to state universities and colleges and vocational technical schools. I really think the problem that we are experiencing in this country, just to level it right to local, is that we've overtaxed our communities, overmanaged them. They have no ability to function because they're just held in such a tight constraint by the legislature. And we elect people in the legislature, to be quite bluntly honest, that only have the money to run. But before they get elected, they've never attended a public meeting. They have no idea how government functions. They get to Harrisburg, they legislate laws that are flawed from the very beginning, and then they take us down the wrong road. And that's what's led to the cost of increases in education, a lack of employment. We've got companies moving all their money and assets outside the country to avoid taxation. And we've placed the whole tax burden on working people. And to be quite blunt, nothing's really functioning. We're 49th in job creation in Pennsylvania, and we have to put that right at the doors of the legislature. We've got to start electing competent people who understand government and want to serve people other than themselves and their friends.
Thank you, Lee. Marty, the question goes to you now. College students today face large amounts of debt and an entry into a very weak job market. How serious do you think this problem is, and what solutions do you propose for lifting the burden that graduating students face?
Andrea, we have the third highest loan payback in the country. I think it's very important that we restore Governor Corbett's cuts, not only to early education, but also to higher education. It's a proven fact that when you invest in education, in higher education, that the graduates stay here and work here and don't move to a different state. And I think that's very important. That should be a very important budget issue. It's something that the current governor isn't very conducive to. Okay, he likes to cut everything he possibly can and not invest in it. And I think we need to craft legislation that restores the cuts that were already given to the state universities. And there's actually legislation now for some state facilities to become private. And actually it's kind of the selling off of state universities. And I think these kind of things need to be stopped. And we need to invest in our own.
Okay, thank you. Lee, you want to use
Could
a
I use my
rebuttal?
minute,
Sure.
please?
Uh-huh.
With all due respect to Mr. Flynn here, okay, the city's population has dropped by 70,000 people in the course of, let's say, 60 years. We have the University of Scranton, we have Penn State, we have Marywood. We have highly educated people coming out of these schools, and they're not staying here. Educated people go where there's opportunity, and there is none here. And the problem we have here has been created by the legislature, and not just here, across Pennsylvania. Because if we're 49th in job creation, we've got a real problem. And that problem stems from our government. And it's time to start sending blue-collar, average working people to the legislature who understand what it means to send their children to school and come out of school with thousands of dollars worth of debt and no opportunity. Okay, and the other thing is, look, having a college education is one thing, but having common sense is another. And we have a legislature with no common sense, no direction, that's politically driven.
Thank you. Okay, so let's move on to another topic now. And let's talk about the state liquor stores. So Marty, you'll answer this question first. And the question is, Pennsylvania is only one of 2 states, the other being Utah, that maintains absolute control over all aspects of the wholesale and retail distribution of wine and liquor. Do you support change to our current system of any kind? And if yes, tell us specifically what changes you would vote for. And it goes to you, Marty.
Yes, I believe in modernization. I do not believe in privatization. It is an asset. The liquor stores bring in about $1 billion a year. I think the last year's was about $500 million into the general fund. It's responsible for about 5,000 family-sustaining jobs. If we privatize, what will end up happening is we'll have high school kids working the counter at schools, and that's something that Pennsylvania should be proud of. We're lowest in the country in terms of children purchasing alcohol because we have responsible people in our state stores. But I also believe that we could do the process better. We could have a more customer-friendly atmosphere. I know some of the neighboring states are very competitive with us, and our stores aren't liquid enough to be price sensitive to the neighboring states. So I think there's a lot of things we can do to be customer friendly, but to still keep the asset. Selling it away for a one-time fee is not the answer here. If I was told that if we were to sell it one time, it's probably worth about $7 or $8 billion, but we'd never see that under Governor Corbett's plan. You're looking at a one-time influx of $1 billion, and it's gone. So I'm a firm believer that, especially in tough times, you need to keep your assets and you need to move forward.
Okay, thank you. Lee, the question to you. Do you support change to our current system in the state liquor stores? And if yes, tell us specifically what changes you would vote for.
Well, I think that the liquor store should stay in the possession of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I think the Johnstown tax should be eliminated. I also believe that the state store should be able to sell to restaurants and bars to have takeout, maybe 10-ounce wine, chilled wines, because we're allowed to sell beer in that format in restaurants and bars. I think we need to find a new way of marketing the state stores, because I think they can yield a lot more income, but I don't agree in ever allowing them to become privatized, because I believe that having a state employee there selling liquors, especially high-proof liquors, it stops young adults from obtaining them, and it does a great service to the public by protecting the public from underage drinking in some aspects because of the amount of alcohol in these beverages. But I think that it's been something that's functioned very well, and I think that we've got to stop selling our assets because they belong to the residents of this Commonwealth, and it's proven itself to be an asset, and it's served us very well in Pennsylvania for a long time.
Okay, thank you. Lee, you'll answer this next question first. And I have a rather long intro into this question, okay? So I want to talk a little bit about the pension crisis and about an innovative idea, okay? So Tim Potts, and you may or may not have read this, he was a guest columnist in the April 28th edition of the Times-Tribune, and he proposed a temporary tax on stock market transactions to solve the pension debt crisis. In this editorial, he stated, "The debt is the result of our legislature, abetted by governors, being irresponsible stewards of the retirement systems. Lawmakers increased the pension benefits in 2001 and then refused to pay for it." Again, this is all what Tim Potts is saying. He says, "To date, every proposal to fix the pension problem can be summarized in 8 words. Higher property taxes for the next 30 years. Now, here's the rest of his proposal. When you buy a $20,000 car, you pay $1,200 in sales taxes. But when someone else buys $20,000 worth of a car company's stock, they pay nothing. So, Tim is proposing a temporary financial transaction tax of 0.3% to be used exclusively to restore our retirement systems. When that's done, the tax goes away. Pennsylvania conservatively could generate between $3.5 billion and $7 billion per year to solve the pension problem. Folks buying stock worth $20,000 would pay just $60 for that transaction, and those who play the stock market would have to buy $400,000 worth of stock to pay the same amount of tax as you do when you buy a $20,000 car. So this was something that I had never heard of before in terms of a proposal that was out there. So he ends his editorial with, "A temporary tax or 30 years of higher property taxes. Where do the candidates stand?" So my question to you is Tim Potts' question. He's put a proposal out there. Where do you stand? What do you think about this in terms of solving the pension crisis? Or do you have something else that might help us with that? And Lee, that question goes to you.
Well, I think I've already presented that. I think that the Marcellus Shale, the tax on that should be used to answer some of those pension problems. But I think our pension problems are much larger than that. Because if you read the Scranton Times recently, they only brushed it. The Central Teamsters plan is going to collapse. There's a lot of other pension plans that are going to collapse across the Commonwealth. Private pensions, now if you're a survivor, and the pension plan reaches a certain level, it hits a trigger and it cuts you off. So if your husband or your wife was the main beneficiary and they die and you have survivor benefits and it's reached that trigger, you're cut off. I mean, the nightmare's coming and the baby boomers are going to take it on the chin. I really see a lot of municipal pensions failing. I see a lot of state pensions failing. It's happening right now. I see a lot of private pensions failing, and I really don't think anything's going to shore them up because the federal government had an obligation to protect them, and they did. They didn't protect Social Security either. So for that matter, we've got to blame not only the legislature here in Harrisburg, but in Washington, because we've elected people that haven't protected our pensions in the future. So we're going to retire, and all these schemes they have sounds good on paper. But look at the Johnstown tax is still in place when Johnstown was flooded, what, 100 years ago? We've got to come back to reality and start dealing with the problems we have and realize that some of them may not be able to be fixed.
Okay, thank you. Marty, the question goes to you. So Tim Pott's final question, a temporary tax or 30 years of higher property taxes, where do the candidates stand?
I like that idea, Andrea. I will say that there's definitely some outside of the box thinking. But, you know, I don't think you could take money from here and money from there and patch this and patch that. It doesn't work that way. Okay, the most important thing, I think, is pension bonds. Money has never been cheaper than it is right now. I think if we take out pension bonds, pay down the pension a little bit, I know there's a plan in the Senate right now to do that. It's a great idea. It's against the ideology of the right, so I don't know how well we're going to work out with that, but I think it's a great idea. Also, we have to fight against the governor who's been collaring back the pension payments from the state. You know, it started with Governor Rendell, okay, now Governor Corbett is choosing to collar back the pension payments also, and what he's actually doing, it's a short-term fix, but in the long run, it's hurting it's going to cost us billions of dollars more because the state isn't putting their fair share of money in. But everybody forgets that the workers actually put what they owe in. They're never short on their payments, and I think they deserve a pension. You know, going to a 401k isn't the answer because that $44 billion has to be paid back. It's just like a car mortgage. It needs to be paid back. You cannot divert money away from the fund. You go to a 401k, that money never goes there, and you end up hurting the health of the fund in the long run. It's something we need to do and we need to invest in.
Okay, thank you. Marty, you're going to answer the next question first. So again, I have a little bit of an intro for this one, all right? And I want to talk about some reforms in terms of how our legislators act. So this one pertains to banning gifts to legislators, okay? So from a Times Tribune editorial that was published on May 5th, and again, these are the words from the Times Tribune. At a State House hearing recently on proposed changes to a limit on gifts, legislators learned from John Schaaf, counsel for the Kentucky Legislative Ethics Commission, that strict limits adopted by that legislature after a series of scandals 21 years ago produced a change in that legislature's culture. Recently, that legislature strengthened the rules further, prohibiting the receipt of so much as a cup of coffee. Pennsylvanians adequately pay the nation's largest full-time legislature to conduct public business in the public interest. No gifts from anyone are necessary in that mission. What is your opinion on this issue? What should we do?
Andrea, first off, I'd like to state that I do not collect per diems. Okay, I turn in expenses. I'm as transparent as I possibly can be by letting the public know what I take and how. I also believe that a gift ban, I have no problem with that. I definitely agree with that. I think we as legislators need to be more transparent in the office. And if they decide that we shouldn't give gifts, and if it'll make a better legislature, I'm all for it.
Okay, thank you. Lee, the question goes to you. What's your opinion on the issue of banning gifts to legislators?
I don't think legislators should ever get a gift. There's only one problem with that. You won't always know what they're accepting, and we wait 30 years to find out and prosecute them. So, I mean, it's kind of a ludicrous thing for a legislature to say they're going to ban gifts, and you're never going to know what's going on anyhow.
Okay. All right. Marty, you will answer the next question first, okay? Did I get that right?
No.
Diana? Lee, sorry.
That's fine.
I crossed off the wrong one. Sorry, Lee, you'll answer the next question. So let's talk a little bit about political financing. So there was, in 2012, the State Integrity Investigation, a project of the Center for Public Integrity, Global Integrity, and Public Radio International, released its state-by-state report card based on analysis of each state's laws and practices that deter corruption and promote accountability and openness. Pennsylvania ranked 20th overall with a grade of C-. Now, you might think that's not too bad, but the Commonwealth received Fs in 4 categories. judicial accountability, political financing, state budget processes, and redistricting. So 4 Fs. So let's talk about one of those Fs right now, and that's political financing. So we received this F as our grade, including a 0 in the category pertaining to citizen access to records for financing political parties, and very low scores for the effectiveness of current regulations for both individual and political party financing. What actions can and should the state legislature take to address this and to improve our status?
I think all records should be open to any resident in regards to any kind of financing for any campaign.
Okay. Marty, the question goes to you.
Andrea, all financing records are open. Also, there's a Citizens United decision in 2010 that was just upheld by the Supreme Court. So it would be pretty hard to make any state changes in the law, because the problem is it says that there can be a donation from anybody for any amount of money. So any PAC can donate whatever it wants to a candidate. So we're up against the Supreme Court decision in terms of that, but I'm all for campaign finance reform. You know, it gives too much of an advantage to someone with a lot of money. The great part is that a vote, no matter what, can be obtained by working hard and doing the people's work. And no matter how much money you have, sometimes that you cannot influence it. And in terms of redistricting, we got an F in. I introduced a bill, House Bill 2187. It's a bipartisan bill that will close a loophole in the current system. And what it ends up doing is it has a 2 Democrat, 2 Republican, and 1 neutral person on the board that decides the redistricting process. In Pennsylvania, we have 1.5 million more Democratic voters, and they have the governor, they have the Senate, and they have the House of Representatives by majorities. So the voters are not being responsibly, they're not being adequately presented in the election.
Okay, thank you. So let's have one more question before we move on to our closing statements. And let's talk now about ethics. And Marty, you'll answer this question first. So what suggestions do you have to improve the ethics of members of the General Assembly? Would the proposed Commission on Public Integrity serve this function?
Could you repeat that question?
What suggestions do you have to improve the ethics of members of the General Assembly? Would the proposed Commission on Public Integrity serve this function?
I believe that it would, Andrea. I think anything that has to do with transparency in office is a good thing. You know, we're doing the people's work, so they should have access to us at all times. They should have the ability to see what we're up to and see what's going on. And we should be held accountable to the voters by an ethics commission. You know, there's been a problem with legislators accepting cash gifts currently in the House of Representatives, and that kind of activity is unacceptable, and it needs to be dealt with properly.
Okay, thank you. Lee, the question to you. What suggestions do you have to improve the ethics of members of the General Assembly? Would the proposed Commission on Public Integrity serve this function?
To be bluntly honest with you, I don't think you can legislate integrity, and I'd like to highlight that if I could. You know, I put my name on the ballot this year and had my petitions challenged by Mr. Wynn, who was an associate and helped campaign for Mr. Flynn here. And then when I went to the hearing in Commonwealth Court, Mr. Flynn wasn't ready to proceed. And I just think that, you know, like the Scranton Times noted, that they believed that Mr. Flynn was behind that. So when you talk about integrity and doing the people's work, okay, that's just an illustration of the kind of people that are in politics, because they talk one thing and they do something else. And I just think that when you challenge a voter's right to pick a candidate to put on the ballot, and then you don't follow through, and you don't come to court prepared to challenge the ballots and succeed, and the judge, Collins, throws it out with prejudice, that proves that you're facing people with no ethics. okay? And it's the most shameful thing that anyone can do to a candidate, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to disenfranchise the very voters you serve. And when we start talking about ethics, it just doesn't belong in this conversation here today because of what's occurred previously by Mr. Flynn. So that's what I have.
Thank you. Marty, you wanted to use a rebuttal.
Yes, Andrea, I would like to just say that I was in no part of that challenge. I had nothing to do with it. And to the chagrin of my opponent, he's falsely accusing me.
Okay,
Could I use my minute, rebuttal?
you can.
Well, it seems that the Scranton Times believes that Mr. Flynn had something to do with it because that's the way the Scranton Times reported it, okay? And Mr. Wynn collected signatures for Mr. Flynn, and they are closely associated. And instead of Mr. Flynn standing up and doing it himself, he did it behind the scenes because evidently ethics, all right, and character are important, and sometimes you don't have either. And then you proceed forward and pretend like you do. And that's how the legislature is broken as it is now, because we elect people that walk the walk and talk the talk. There's only one problem. It's a vacuum.
Marty, I'll allow you one additional rebuttal since this really is personal at this point, and then we're going to end
Yes, Andrea, thank you. I've walked the walk, Andrea. My office is top 10 performing in the state in constituent service, top 10. We've been very, very aggressive in helping the people of our area. My staff has been a tremendous asset. I've stuck up for the moral character and values of the people of this area. You know, it's not like driving a truck, okay? It's like driving an aircraft carrier. There's 63,000 people that you have to represent, and you have to vote their morals and their values, and I've walked the walk.
Lee, one additional rebuttal for you, and then we're done.
I'd just like to say that talk is cheap, and I've listened to Mr. Flynn, and I respect the man. But you know, his constituents in the district can't get him on the phone. Mr. Welby attends his meetings many times and speaks for him. He attended the Scranton Council meeting where Mr. Flynn was hired to represent the residents in the city, and he didn't appear. And we're talking about a city in financial distress that's near the point of bankruptcy and collapse. So what I have to say here is, you know, Mr. Flynn, I really appreciate your verbiage, but it's really meaningless because sometimes words have no meanings depending on who says them.
And with that, that ends our program for this evening, except for closing statements. And we drew straws for who would give the first closing statement, and that would be Marty Flynn. The floor is yours. You have 2 minutes for your closing statement.
Andrea, I'd just like to thank everyone again at the Women's League of Voters for having this debate. It's been very fulfilling. I would just like to say I've worked tirelessly since I've been elected, okay? Every time I'm supposed to be in Harrisburg, even when there's council meetings, I'm in Harrisburg sometimes, it does happen, Monday to Wednesday, and then I think most council meetings are on Tuesdays. But I represent my people. I don't miss votes. I've missed 2 days since I've been there. I had to get emergency surgery. Other than that, my attendance has been perfect. I don't miss caucus meetings. My office does tremendous work in the community. I've walked the walk. The people of my district know I've walked the walk. I've done more in 4 years at my office than my predecessor has done I've done more in 14 months than my predecessor has done in 4 years. The proof is in the pudding, and I'm just respectfully asked to keep representing you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. How about a round of applause for Marty Flynn? Thank you. Lee, you have now 2 minutes for your closing statement.
I'd just like to ask the voters to consider to give me their vote. It's not a personal thing between me and Mr. Flynn. I think Mr. Flynn should be held accountable for his actions and the actions of those around him. Now, the council meetings are on Thursday, and the vote that took, and the time that Mr. Welby came in for you, Mr. Haggerty was there and State Senator Blake was there. I think we've had a lack of representation in the city in the 113th and outside the city in the 113th. We need very serious, capable people, and I do feel that being a truck driver is not demeaning. There's cooks, there's dishwashers, There's all kinds of people in America. The blue-collar people in this country have to finally stand up for themselves and push the people off that are legislating laws blindly. I never saw this gentleman at a council meeting in my 25 years there. And when the city needed him the most, he was nowhere. And when you talk about how he won his election, he browbeat Mr. Murphy on personal issues, and they don't belong in a campaign. And you know something? I'm not a man who campaigns with signs, but I'll tell you this, I've had my sign stolen on West Side. I've talked to a lot of residents in the city. They're really disgusted about the situations in the city with bridges that are not repaired, on a lack of ability to communicate with Mr. Flynn. Look, we can all talk about giving away coats and food drives and everything, but the people in this community need people who can help them create jobs and solve problems. We have a city that's in the throes of bankruptcy. Okay, we don't need any more shows or showboating or silliness. We need somebody who can be elected, go to Harrisburg, understand what's taking place here, and legislate change. And not just in regards to Mr. Flynn, but probably most of the legislature, because this isn't a game, and people are important, and Democrats and Republican parties mean nothing. Thank you.
Thank you. That is the closing statement from Lee Morgan. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
How about a round of applause for both of our candidates for their commitment to democracy? And I'd like to remind you that the League has also, well, first of all, that this is the debate for the 113th Legislative District, which includes West Scranton, North Scranton, Green Ridge, Minooka, Center City, part of South Scranton, plus South Abington Township, Clarks Green, and Pine Brook, and that the lines have been redrawn, so you want to make sure that you know who the candidates are in your particular district. The League also sponsored a debate with the candidates for the 112th. You can see that also on ECTV and on YouTube. And we have also produced a panel discussion pertaining to the Lackawanna County vote on the change in the form of government. That's a critically important vote this year that will take place on your primary ballot. You need to vote whether you're a Republican or Democrat or an independent. As long as you're a registered voter, you should vote in this primary if you live in Lackawanna County. And you can see that also on ECTV and YouTube. Thank you so much for watching this evening, and we'll see you on May 20th, election night, for live election returns on ECTV. Thank you.